They will never, ever forget it.
Hey, welcome back, ScreenCrush. I'm Brianna. And did you ever notice that Captain America: First Avenger and X-Men Origins Wolverine are very similar movies?
They are?
Yes, and I think there's actually one similar scene that shows why one of the movies is like this, and the other was like this.
Getting kind of bored.
Now, these two movies are interesting to highlight because, well, very few superhero movies are actually set in historic wars. And I've always been a big World War II buff. I love reading alternate histories or playing war strategy games like Call of War. They're our partner for this video.
What's Call of War?
Call of War is a free online player versus player strategy game. You can choose a real country to lead during World War II and then fight up to 100 players in real-time games that can actually take weeks to complete. This makes the gameplay so immersive. And what really stood out to me is how you not only build units and secret weapons like tanks and A-bombs, but I love the game's focus on the economy. You really have to build up your resources on these historically accurate maps. I mean, the level of detail in this game is insane. It's like really immersing yourself into this time period. There's trade, there's espionage, technology research, plus you can make alliances, declare war on neighbors, and you can play with the same account on PC and mobile. So anywhere you go, you can check in on your war theater. So if you sign up with our link, you get a unique starter pack with an exclusive gift, 13,000 gold and 1 month of a premium subscription for free. Now, this offer is only available for 30 days, so get it while it lasts. Now, back to what I was saying. But before I get into that scene, I want to point out all of the many similarities between these two movies. They both have clunky titles that were the result of a studio wanting to set up a franchise. Captain America was not the first Avenger because the Avengers did not exist in the 1940s, but Marvel Studios was trying to prime the pump for the Avengers movie that was releasing the next year. And X-Men Origins Wolverine came on the heels of X-Men: The Last Stand and was supposed to be the first in a new series of spin-offs. In fact, the next entry was supposed to be about Magneto hunting Nazis, and a lot of those ideas appeared later in First Class.
Wait, why did the X-Men franchise end? They could have made those stories forever. There's like a jillion X-Men comics.
It's a good question. I think it's because the X-Men movies involve more actors and are more expensive to make as those actors became more popular.
Where the is everyone?
Anyways, both movies start with a hero who is a skinny, sickly weakling who later gets superpowers. They sign up to join the military, fight in World War II, and the military commander they serve under is a central character to the story. They also sign up with a person who is close to them, and later the fighting separates them from this brotherly bond. They each sign up for a government experiment that is administered through a series of nearly identical injections. Seriously, it looks like the first Avenger lifted this straight from Origins, and of course they each sign up for very different reasons.
I don't like bullies. I don't care where they're from.
No law. No code of conduct. You point me in the right direction, you get the hell out of my way.
There's also a mad scientist type experimenting on people, and the big bad is a rogue government agent who is conducting their experiments for selfish personal reasons. The final battle is with a disfigured superhuman who underwent a similar experiment to the one that the hero did. The hero loses someone close to them, and by the end of the film, they each lost the life that they once knew. Steve wakes up 70 years in the future, and Logan has his memory wiped. But each of them also loses their lives because of a personal sacrifice. Steve drives the plane into the ocean, while Wolverine could have walked away, but chose to return to the island to save the mutant kids. Each movie also introduces characters that will be important to the franchise in later installments, including setting up the heroes who will one day found the secret organization that the hero will work for in the future. Also, each movie goes really heavy into montages. Now, I should also note that while these movies are similar, the heroes are very different for a key reason. I mean, they're both soldiers, but Wolverine spent a lot of his life running away from the fight because he always knew he'd win. Cap always runs toward a fight because he's afraid of what will happen if he doesn't show up. He feels a sense of responsibility to uphold justice in the world. Even 70 years later, if Steve is needed, he never runs from a fight. Now contrast this to Wolverine in X-Men Origins, the Wolverine First Class Logan. He's always running away from the fight. Not because he's a coward, but because he's scared of himself and what he'll do and who he will hurt along the way. That's who these characters are. One is a soldier and the other is a reluctant animal. But even though these characters are so different, the movies are a lot alike. And like I said earlier, they began the movie as similar people, sickly and non-powered. But there is one very similar scene in each film that shows us exactly why one was a massively successful launch to the most successful franchise of all time, and the other movie was literally murdered by one of its stars in a later film.
Hey, it's me,
Don't scratch.
First, let's talk about Captain America: First Avenger. Now, I don't think people give Marvel enough credit for having the courage to set this entire movie in World War II. The original 1990 Captain America film, which, yes, does exist, that movie does show Steve's origins in the 1940s for the first half hour. After that, he's reawakened in the far-off future of 1992. The MCU could have easily repeated the same tactic and still made a good movie. Use the first act of Steve's origin story and then bring him into the modern day. But instead, they tapped Rocketeer director Joe Johnston to show us the Marvel Cinematic Universe of 80 years ago, and to really show us why Steve Rogers is the hero that we really all need. The next 6 movies that Steve is in will take him on a journey that will challenge his morality and character, and that journey would mean nothing if we didn't see Steve in his original element before he got superpowers. This movie showed us a very expensive, incredibly realistic skinny CGI Steve Rogers for the first act. Seriously, like, this is mostly seamless. They put Chris Evans' face on a body double, and you never question the illusion. Establishing Steve as this skinny dude shows us who he really is. He's not defined by his muscles, but by who he was before he got those muscles.
But a weak man knows the value of strength and knows compassion.
This is opposed to Origins, which rockets us through the first 130 years of Logan's life, but more on that movie in just a second. The first Avenger is very careful in how it presents Steve. First, introducing him as a 4F man wanting to join up and do his part. And then we see that he is the greatest of all heroes, the guy who tells a loudmouth in a movie theater to shut up.
Hey, just start the cartoon.
Hey, you want to shut up?
We see that, even as a weakling, Steve Rogers does not back down from a fight.
I can do this all day.
And later, he leaves a date with a woman to go sign up for the military again.
You have no idea how to talk to a woman, do you?
Showing that he always thinks of duty over his own happiness, which brings us to basic training where he is bullied by the other soldiers, but he doesn't get angry or seek revenge. He keeps his head down and does the work and actually outsmarts all of them by capturing the flag. You see, Steve has been beat up his whole life, but he does not resent anyone for this.
Did you have something against running away?
You start running, they'll never let you stop.
He's not mad. He doesn't feel sorry for himself. He doesn't feel entitled to things. He's just a guy who wants to help. And this leads into the scene that we're talking about here today. The moment when Steve Rogers truly becomes Captain America.
When he wears the suit?
No.
When he gets powers?
No.
When he stands up to Thanos and his army all by himself and says, I can do this all day, Thanos.
He doesn't actually do that, and also no. The moment Steve became Captain America is when Colonel Phillips was trying to prove that Hodge was the best candidate for the serum, and he throws a dummy grenade into the training area. Everybody runs away. Actually, except Peggy, mind you. But Steve leaps onto the dead grenade to shield everyone from the blast.
Get back!
That is my favorite part of this scene, actually. That as Steve is there waiting to die, he just wants to make sure everyone else is out of harm's way.
Get back!
It was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
Now, I should point out that a few years ago, I did another scene versus scene video where I compared the introduction of Captain America to the introduction of Wonder Woman, because she had such an epic introduction in the No Man's Land scene. It's the first time we see Wonder Woman, like, in her suit in her origin story. And several commenters on that video pointed out to me that this grenade scene is actually when Steve became Captain America. And I agree. Wonder Woman did have the better introduction of the hero's suit, but First Avenger is the better movie and did a much better job showing us why our hero is more than just their powers. So, back to this scene. Phillips is trying to prove that Hodge is the best case for the serum because he's a soldier. His criteria is that he's fast, strong, and he follows orders.
Get your ass up out of that dirt and stand in that line at attention until somebody comes and tells you what to do.
Now Hodge, as we've seen, thinks of himself before others. He's arrogant. He is a bully.
I got a few moves I know you'll like.
Unlike Hodge, Steve Rogers is not fast. He is not strong. In fact, he doesn't even follow orders. He's more prone to break the rules. He tried several times to sign up for the military under different names, and he disobeys direct orders to go rescue Bucky from the Hydra base. But this kid, this skinny kid from Brooklyn who should hate the world and resent men like Hodge, he wakes up every day and he only wants to help. Even right here, with his dying breath, he only wants to help.
Get away! Get back!
That is the moment he became Captain America. So that is how the MCU shows us who Captain America is. No supervillains, no skybeams, no powers. Just a bit of CGI trickery on the face of a regular guy who's got a lot of heart. So what about X-Men Origins Wolverine? What was the one scene that revealed who that character was? So before we talk about this scene, first I want to talk about why exactly this movie was so bad. ScreenCrush's Matt Singer wrote a great piece on this movie a few years ago where he perfectly summed it up. The goofy title pretty much says it all. Matt then goes on to say that director Gavin Hood tries to make 3 movies at once. once, a Wolverine adventure, an origin story for the character, and also an X-Men movie. First Avenger committed itself to telling a single story in a single era, while Origins plays like a Wolverine biopic.
What's a biopic?
Oh, you know, those movies that like try to condense an entire life of a person into 2 hours, like Ray, Walk the Line, or God help us, Bohemian Rhapsody. It's off topic, but do you guys want to see the worst edit ever in a film that actually won the Academy Award for Best Editing? Watch this.
I blow you a kiss when I'm on stage.
Like a 4-frame clip of his dad waving for no reason. I don't understand it. So the thing about a biopic is that they're rarely able to actually tell a singular story arc accurately because like nobody's life has a single arc. Our lives are made up of like mini arcs that create the sum total of who we are. Biopics aren't really meant to tell a single story. They're meant to help the audience relive the greatest hits of an artist's life. Like back to Bohemian Rhapsody, which tries to give us the origin story for every single Queen song.
Imagine thousands of people doing this in unison.
What's the lyric?
That's what X-Men Origins Wolverine does. If there is any aspect of Wolverine that you like from the X-Men trilogy, then this movie is there to show you where it came from. The dog tag, the connection with Sabretooth, his leather jacket, his bike, the adamantium, Stryker's son, and of course, the god-awful mutant cameos from Scott and Professor Xavier. Biopic cameos always crack me up because characters are like always calling other people by their names to clue in the audience on who this guy is.
And what about me, Charlie?
I want some chili fries.
You'll be fine, or my name's not Buddy Holly.
And that last one was from the ultimate biopic spoof, Walk Hard. And I bet you couldn't even tell that it was supposed to be a joke. So, in Origins, we have the cartoon Xavier, the proto-X-Men, Taylor Kitsch's Gambit, desperately trying to set up his own spin-off film, and of course, this cringy name drop.
Did you just call me Blob?
So this movie is constantly trying to set up other movies instead of stopping to focus on the movie that we are currently watching. But there's also the horrible visual effects that look like the singing sword in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And there's also this quaint farm couple that helps out Logan, and after 2 very short scenes, they get the funniest death that I've ever seen. And the movie's most egregious sin is that it gave us the perfect casting of Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool.
You look really nice today. It's the green. Brings out the seriousness in your eyes.
Oh my God, do you ever shut up, pal?
No, not when I'm awake.
Now look, I don't mind that he didn't wear a comic accurate suit. After all, this was the 2000s X-Men, where everybody dressed like a Matrix character.
We look like the hot twins from the Matrix.
But the final boss of the movie is Wade without even having the ability to talk. I'm really glad that actual Deadpool corrected this mistake. Now, I talked at length about the first Avengers first act, so I also want to explain Origins opening act because it's this first act where we get that similar scene that sets up the movie to fail. We open with young James lifting his origin from the comic. He is awoken by a lover spat between his mom and 2 men. Their groundskeeper kills his dad and James loses his temper, causing his mutant powers to manifest as he kills the hired help, just before finding out that this man was actually his real pop. So then he and little Sabretooth, who turns out are brothers, run away from home together. Gorgeous montage of them fighting in different wars throughout the centuries, teasing an idea that actually would have made for a much better movie. Showing these 2 animal men revert to savagery as war became industrialized around them would have been an epic tale. Hell, they could have even had Sabretooth sympathize with the Nazis because he sees himself as the Superman. But instead, all of this is told through an opening credits montage, including Victor nearly raping a woman until Logan stops him. What a super weird thing to say that came out of nowhere. The montage shows Victor growing increasingly more savage, but James is always the good guy, always under control. Then they're recruited by Stryker and they sign up because essentially they have no choice. Now that's something we have to note in this opening act. We never have any idea why James and Victor are fighting in these wars, or what they think of endless warfare, humanity, or their roles as living weapons. The Stryker mission is yet another montage that takes us to a point where he commands James and the others to kill some civilians. But James is a good guy, so he walks away. Then we leap forward in time again to show how Logan is now living peacefully with a woman. As Matt pointed out in his essay on the film, the woman knows everything about his old life. So how did that conversation go? What does this woman want? Why would she be with him? How did they meet? Why did Logan love her so much? Her storyline is frustrating because she only exists to be the woman in the movie, the love interest who is fridged to give the hero motivation.
Remember, you're just a prop in here.
Now all of that is undone in the third act with the twist that she wasn't actually dead and she was working for Stryker, but we don't actually get the repercussions from that twist. Like if the 2 of them were then forced to work together or interact in any meaningful way, then that twist would mean something. It would further the plot of the movie. But instead, this woman is just a prop. And I'm not even calling her by her name because the movie never gives her any agency or character traits. She's just there to give him his superhero name.
Means the Wolverine.
Ah, Jesus Christmas.
And he ultimately forgets her at the end of the film anyways. After she dies, Stryker shows up, and that's the end of Act 1, so let's stop there. You know what we didn't get in all those 130 years of history? We never got a sense of who James is, or what he wants, or what his values are.
Who are you?
Like seriously, if you had never seen an X-Men movie, you would have no idea who this guy is, other than his long life, he's got claws, and he's indestructible. The opening montage shows us that Victor is becoming more violent, and that Logan is the calm, centered brother. In fact, throughout all these battles, we never see Logan lose his temper, or become savage, or do anything that's unjustified. And that's important because all through the movie, people are always telling him that he's gonna have to let the animal out.
You're not an animal, Logan.
Become the animal. You wanted the animal, Colonel. You got it.
You're not an animal.
But in the movie, we never see that animal. The first act of the first Avenger is careful to show us who Steve Rogers is. But the first act of this movie just shows us that Wolverine is indestructible and he can fight really good.
I'm just kidding.
In fact, we only ever see him be noble. He fights on the right side of every war. He stops Victor from committing war crimes. He stands by his brother. Whereas, if the movie was about James becoming an animal, well, we should have seen that animal. We should have seen Wolverine at the depths of his savagery, so he would have a personality defect to overcome. What makes Wolverine work as a character is that he is great at killing. The best he is at what he does.
What I do best isn't very nice.
But he hates himself for this. Logan doesn't want to be a killer, so he's always fighting against his nature. Now look, this Wolverine, it's an archetype going back thousands of years to ancient myths about men who would turn into beasts. Logan is the werewolf, the Selkie, the skinwalker. Every culture in the world has originated this myth, so it resonates with everyone on planet Earth. After all, everybody has a little bit of beast inside of them, whose base impulses we learn to keep under control.
Like pooping in your special chairs instead of on the street.
Exactly. Being human means pooping in special chairs instead of on the street. So, at the center of Wolverine is this question. Is he a man who has become a monster, or a monster pretending to be a man? His movie should have been about a guy who becomes savage and regains his humanity, but then tragically loses that humanity when his memory's wiped. So where did this movie go wrong? What is the one scene that set up the film to fail? Well, it's the first scene in the movie. After the first 5 minutes, the movie was doomed to be a failure.
Oh, how so, person?
Well, the movie wants us to think that Wolverine could revert to savagery at any moment, while we're also meant to see him as a kind, upstanding superhero. But unlike the first Avenger, the movie never took time to establish who James was before he got his powers. All we get is the brief prologue where the movie squandered its narrative potential in just 5 minutes. So, let's break down that opening scene. We begin in the 1840s with young James coughing in his bed. Then young Victor says,
You're always sick.
And young James replies,
You were sick when you were my age.
Now this, of course, is connecting the two of them and giving us a hint that they are secret brothers. Then James's kind, wealthy father enters.
You always say that.
And you always pull through, don't you?
And then, a commotion.
Your father's drunk again.
James's father leaves to see what's amiss, and after a couple of seconds, James hears gunshots. He enters the foyer of his home to find that his father has been shot dead by another man. This trauma slowly activates James's mutant powers. Now, this scene should have been a full-on Cronenberg body horror scene. We should have felt the claws rip from young James's flesh. But instead, it's hilarious because of this. That's the scream of a little boy from Central Casting acting his little heart out. God love him. Like, I think they could have done something here with the sound design, like mixed in the child scream with something savage like a bear, like this incredible sound mixing in the movie Annihilation. And then young James rushes in to attack the man who murdered his father, and he says,
He wasn't your father, son.
Now look, and because we don't know who these people are, this really just comes off as melodrama and it has no emotional effect on the audience. So when his mom asks this question,
What are you?
it really doesn't resonate at all. James runs from the house, is pursued by Victor, and the two of them resolve to run away together because they're brothers.
We're brothers, Jimmy. You realize that? And brothers protect each other.
Now, the reason I am picking on this scene is because it's the only scene in the movie where we see young James Howlett actually lose control and let the animal out. Like I said, this is supposed to be the crux of Wolverine's character, that the world sees him as an animal pretending to be a human. But in this scene, we get a few seconds with sickly James the hint of a scandalous love triangle, and then the kid pretty justifiably loses his temper and accidentally kills the guy who he thinks just killed his dad. Like, the equivalent of this would be like if Captain America First Avenger started off with Steve in basic training and hopping on that grenade. Then his entire transformation into Captain America was of course a montage, followed by a montage of World War II, so the rest of the movie could show us the little young Avengers in the 1980s.
So what should they have done different?
Well, this whole origin story is adapted from the comics. The entire first issue of that book is just setting up life in this house with young James, his best friend Dog, who is young Sabretooth, and a beautiful young ward named Rose, which shows why later in life Wolverine has such a penchant for redheads. Now, much like the first act of the movie First Avenger, there is very little comic book action in these first two issues. It's extremely grounded, and actually sets us up to think that the violent, abused character Dog is the young Wolverine. The comic book lays the groundwork for James's powers manifesting, and by the time he pops his claws, we know who he is. We can see that his life is on a path toward comfort and wealth, and his mutant gift now derails his life. And the moment when he kills his birth father is brutal and savage. It feels like his mutant gene might turn him into a monster, and this also lays the groundwork for 50 years of Wolverine stories that are to come. But in the movie, him accidentally murdering the guy who just murdered his dad is totally justifiable. It's borderline self-defense. And that's the problem with this movie. They don't ever have the courage to show Wolverine in a bad light. He's always fighting on the right side of wars. We don't know how he feels about these wars or if he enjoyed the fighting. And like Matt Singer said, it would be legitimately interesting to see what it's like to live forever in an endless swirl of war and death, but all that pathos is confined to the opening titles. This is so important because when we meet his girlfriend, she's just his girlfriend. Imagine a movie where we get to see Logan go over the edge in wartime and this woman helps to heal him. Then we would actually care if she lived or died. If they needed to, I guess they could kill her off at the end of Act 2, setting up like a bloody revenge story for the third act. Now look, if I could offer my 2 cents on how to fix this mess, and of course, look, hindsight is 20/20, and I get that Gavin Hood probably got a checklist from the studio about what he had to include in this movie. But in hindsight, the entire movie should have been set during the Civil War.
But why?
Well, during the Civil War, Victor and James would have been in their 20s, just now coming of age, instead of 140 years old like they are in this movie. The Civil War killed between 600,000 and 1 million people in just 4 years, which at the time was the highest death toll in the shortest period of time in the world.
Wow, is that true?
I think so, I didn't look it up. But I do know that the Civil War was the first war to use industrialized warfare on a huge scale. It's when we began the transition from a pastoral nation into an industrialized nation. Simply put, the Civil War represents the loss of American innocence.
Yeah, but Wolverine is Canadian.
I know, but the story of the Civil War is also the story of Logan. Ordinary men who set out to do good but wrought endless bloodshed. And of course, the Civil War made the country pay a bloody price, but it was worth it. Afterwards, slavery was gone from Western civilization and the United States emerged stronger than ever. And for Logan, this bloody conflict could have given him a chance to finally unleash that monster inside of him. Maybe he and Victor start off fighting as mercenaries for the South, but Logan has a change of heart when he sees the horrors of slavery firsthand. Then they could pit the two of them on opposite sides of the conflict, just like many American families were split during the conflict and fought on opposite sides. You can show James embracing his inner beast, but then coming back from the edge. Like, give us an anti-hero that's actually hard to root for, who has to overcome internal struggles, somebody who has to fight to be human. And then, if he does lose his memory, then that would be a tragedy. He would lose all of that ground he gained, revert back to being the animal. It would send the message that Wolverine is trapped in a vicious cycle, always condemned to revert to the beast. So in the next movie, The Wolverine, it would mean something when we see him start off the movie living in the woods following his murder of Jean Grey. But this movie doesn't have time for all that character development because it's not really an origin story for Wolverine. It's a prequel. It's stuffed to the gills with member berries to set up spin-off franchises and has effects so cheap that it feels like a knockoff movie. This movie is We Have X-Men at Home. And just a reminder everyone, click our link in the description for your unique starter pack to Call of War, the most immersive real-time strategy game that I have ever played. Well guys, that's just my thoughts on this. Which movie did you like better? Where do you think Origins failed? Let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.